Good morning.
Good morning.
Before continuing with the topic, I would like to slightly go back to wrap up a little bit yesterday's talk, in the sense that I feel like in the end we rushed a little bit over joy and equanimity, but anyway, yeah. And there was this question yesterday about it was not phrased like that, but I understood it as a little bit how do we translate all of this inner attitude into social responsibility, or how do we act in the world? This all sounds very good. This all sounds very good, but what about, our place in society?
Und ich möchte noch mal ein bisschen auf die Frage, die gestern formuliert worden ist, eingehen, die lautete, wie man denn all das, was sich eigentlich sehr gut anhört, tatsächlich dann auch in unseren gesellschaftlichen Alltag einbringt und in welcher Weise man da Verantwortung übernimmt.
And kind of recently, I don't know, a few months ago, I saw this quote in Facebook, probably, which is, yeah, why not? Where somebody was saying, like, the ultimate act of resistance was to remain joyful and compassionate in a world like ours.
Und ich habe vor ein paar Monaten wahrscheinlich auf Facebook einen Post gesehen, ein Zitat gesehen, wo jemand gesagt hat, dass der ultimative Akt des Widerstands der sei, in einer Welt wie der unseren erfüllt zu bleiben von Freude und Mitgefühl.
And I found it so inspiring and so true, because as we were saying yesterday, with all this hopelessness that we see around ourselves, and these outrageous things happening, it's very easy to sort of feed into all of that. It doesn't mean it's not justifiable. It is from a worldly perspective. But if we go along with this anger and this, we are actually, as we said yesterday, we are actually feeding into more of the same. So we often say things like, I want to make a difference in the world. I don't think there's a better way to make a difference than to have a different sound of voice, to be a different voice. It's almost like everybody speaking Chinese and then suddenly you respond in German. So, yes, it is very consistent with the Buddhist perspective, where the most important thing is how we feel, our inner attitude. And then, if our attitude is right, right in this sense, it's something that brings more appeasement, more peace for ourselves, for a starter, and then it naturally radiates around us. But if we are in that sort of frequency, let's say, then we then act from there accordingly to our position in the world. And by position, I mean everything, our social status, our authority, our capacity. And it might just be giving a nice warm smile to somebody we meet in the supermarket. But that's already something, we don't have to think we're going to stop the war or find the cure for cancer, or if we can, fine, beautiful. But if we can't, because it's not our domain, we don't have the power for that, then it's fine too. Just being in retreat, it's already something. We are bringing some counterbalance to the madness, Because we often, balance between two extremes. It's either, I cultivate this inner peace or something, and I don't want to be involved in anything, so to preserve my own peace of mind, or then we jump into defending causes, but we forget to cultivate the inner attitude, the right inner attitude from which then we can act in the world. And then we get lost and again fall into taking sides and being against this and against that, and and we can be easily swallowed into this opposing stance without really having a more profound understanding of all the ins and outs, all the bits and pieces that compose any situation. Buddhism can help us with is to create and to cultivate and to preserve this inner attitude. And then also the practice of meditation, understanding interdependence, and all of the Buddhist method then gives us more and more creativity by freeing us from these rigid positions where everything is white or black, and then there's no inter-between, and things are very rigid and solid. As the more we get freer, the freer and freer we get from this view, the more fluid and creative we become. And then we can come up with very creative solutions or very creative answers in a different language. so to respond to in ways that can also be extremely effective. Like things like the Walk for Peace that happened in the US recently. It might not stop the war, probably won't, but it had so much impact. You could see how thousands of people, and as the days progressed, there were more and more people, that were so happy with this. So that happiness is a counterbalance in itself as an energy, So I think things like that have an incredible power, even though maybe not with the immediate effect, visible effect that we might think, You walk for peace, it doesn't bring peace, but it does bring the longing for peace inside everyone's heart. And that's the most important thing. One of my favorite stories about how creative one can be in responding in a different language comes from a Native American. Sitting Bull was very famous.
Yeah.
And there's this story that happened at some point later in life where, due to many disappointments, his authority was kind of being challenged because, he was always in favor of dialogue with the American government, and it never really worked, and so on and so forth. And there was this point where there was this big battle, and he felt like, there was a lot of younger warriors that were, very keen on fighting and all of this. So he wanted to somehow, he felt that it would be good for his authority, his voice to be a bit restored so that, wisdom could still have some impact. So there was this battle, and there were the American lines and then the Native American, and and there were bullets and arrows going back and forth. And then suddenly he just tells the men who were around him, let's do something. So he gets down his horse and he goes and sits between the two lines, with a group of people. So the battle was still going on. They were sitting, smoking, peace pipe, or how do you call it in English?
Yeah.
And apparently he showed no sign of fear. Nobody was injured. But this action had so much impact. I mean, he was old, so he probably wouldn't be able to, do all these warrior feats that younger warriors could do. But he could do something so much more impressive. Because, when you're in this adrenaline rush, you can become blind and attack even someone much stronger than you, and you have this kind of apparent strength that comes from the adrenaline. But in cold blood, coming down from the horse and sitting to smoke a pipe, that is courageous and very creative. Yeah? So that is one of my favorite examples. Yeah. We can, it can be, as I said, this of course is a historical example, and many others of different people over the centuries. But it doesn't need to be something so, so memorable. It can be anything, as I said, at our own level, within our own capacity. Things that bring people together, things that foster joy, instead of the same old complaints about how everything is so bad, can be starting a Buddhist choir. Why not, It brings joy. Singing together, playing music together, dancing together is very nice. And it seems it has nothing to do with what we're saying, but it has everything to do with what we're saying. Because again, it's not how it looks like, it's where it comes from and what it fosters when people come, what it's contagious, in the best possible way. So now, how do we nurture and keep this inner sanctuary, kind of, It is truly, when we talk about refuge, this is the real refuge, it's finding, creating, and nurturing something within ourselves. It's not the statue of the Buddha, even though it might be beautiful. It's not the temple in itself, because all of this is external. And of course, we need to start there, because we need a mirror to see our face. So we need the temples, we need the statues, we need the teachers, we need the teachings, we need all of that. But as we internalize more and more and more and more, they will still be there and we'll still respect them profoundly, but we will see it more and more as the reflection of our own nature. And in the end, if you can only find refuge in the temple, if you can't go there, then you're stuck. So, we need to find the equivalent inside. It doesn't go from, how can I say, apparently it comes from the inside from the outside towards the inside, but in reality it's the opposite. It comes from the inside to the outside. Because if there was nothing inside, we would never recognize the statues and the temples and the teachers. They would just be, we would be indifferent. The reason why we respect them and the reason why we feel touched is because it resonates with something inside ourselves. So, and that is the true refuge. The ultimate one is inside. And that's what we have to nurture and cultivate and preserve. Preserve, it's very important.
Und das bringt uns zu der Frage, wie wir das ermöglichen können, diesen inneren heiligen Raum sozusagen wirklich nähren zu können. Das ist letztendlich die...
Well, in a sense, I think the world being so bad right now can be used. We can't do much about it anyway. But it can be used to really make us realize that the practice it has become now a survival. It was not that strong when I started, like 50 years ago. There's this saying in Tibetan Buddhism, and that is very interesting, that I always connected with. They say that dukkha, this sort of dissatisfaction, it's not exactly suffering, can be felt by beings in different ways. For some beings, it's like having an eyelash on your hand. You can't feel it, you barely notice it. But for others, it's like having an eyelash in your eye, you can't stop,
rubbing your eyes.
Rubbing, yeah. And you know, like 50 years ago when I started in Buddhism, yes, dukkha was there. It's not like it wasn't. But the things weren't so inflamed like they are now, you know. So there was a whole generation, my generation, we were very idealistic, you know, the hippies and all of that. So there was we were very interested. I mean, some of us, but it was a generation fact. And nowadays things are very different. But at the same time, there's perhaps less idealism, but it's more like a survival need nowadays. And so when we think of the practice now, it's not a luxury. It has become so indispensable to remain sane in the amidst the insanity of the what is surrounding us. So we have an extra motivation to stick to the practice as breath, you know,
Yeah.
as air, you know. Yeah, at the time, you know, practicing something like Buddhism was a bit a luxury, as was thinking about the environment in those days. You know, it was like, it was not a necessity yet. It was something optional, kind of. Nowadays, both have become a survival necessity. We need to take care of the environment. Maybe it's a bit too late, actually, but we still need to do something about it. And at the same time, we need to realize that this practice is maybe not the only thing, but certainly one thing that can help us survive in sanity. So I think, of course, as Buddhist practitioners, you know how to cultivate this inner sanctuary. It goes through, you know, we talked about yesterday, interdependence, the understanding of emptiness and interdependence and impermanence, and also the cultivating of heart qualities like compassion, love, joy, equanimity, and all of this. So I don't need to go over that. We spoke enough about it. But there's one thing about how to preserve it, how to sort of protect it, you know. And and that is also very important, because we can, it's like sometimes we are building something and at the same time just letting it be destroyed by something else. So it takes a lot of energy for a small result. So we need to be able to know how to protect this inner, you know, this inner peace and this inner sanctuary. I mean, there's so much noise, you know, in this world. It's filled with news, fake news, opinions, I don't know, inflamed statements, all sorts of things. And if we don't filter it, you know, you get all this junk, and it's not just microplastics, it's much more than that. And then that sort of can undermine, you know, and weaken our resolve, our inner peace. And for what? You know, for what purpose? You know, what is the benefit of, you know, just going unfiltered and absorbing everything, all these opinions and all these thoughts and everything else? You know, there's the truth in internet. Internet has given power to each one of us to express their opinions, but most opinions really are not worthwhile. So I can tell you my criteria, and of course you will do whatever you want anyway. But my criteria is when I hear something, well, first of all, I filter a lot immediately, you know, from the starter. But even when I hear something, I look at how I react. If I can hear that, if it's something really shocking, say, you know, if I can hear that and then, you know, process it through understanding instead of, an immediate reaction, oh, this is terrible, or this is good, or, this person is so bad. Understanding, like with interdependence, with all taking in account all the factors and everything. And if it, in the end, the result is some sort of compassion, like not compassion, not in the patronizing way, like, oh, these poor people, they don't know anything, not like that, but compassion in the sense how terrible that these things can happen. Not this person did this or this person did that, because in a way, for anything to happen in the world, there has to be a lot of complacent people. It's not just the one that is visible, the face. It's everyone around, and even in a certain sense, we are all, even, there's a nano responsibility in all of us by voting or not voting, if you're talking about politics, or abstaining, or, just anyway. But it's more like, how terrible that these things still can happen. And then, the Buddhist fellow comes in and says, here it is, we all suffer from the same things. The problem is not the person, it's the clashes, it's the ignorance, is the hatred, is the self-concern, is the, and these are our, as I said, I think I said yesterday, those are our common enemies. So when I see something like that, and I feel like this is the reason why I'm practicing, it's to start with myself and try to work on it, and then eventually maybe inspire others to do the same. And that's how the society can actually change. So if I see that by seeing these things, my resolve strengthens, then it's okay. But if I see that I'm starting to, become upset and be angry, and then I sort of put it aside and try to work on myself, because we often get so upset about things we can't do anything about, and so I think we need to filter things that in a way that learning what we can cope with and what we can't for the moment, and avoid falling into this, this very strong opposition and losing, our compassion, our joy, and all of that. So, because by doing that, we actually are not making a difference in the world. If we fall into these things, we are just the same voice as everybody else, maybe on the opposite side, but doesn't matter, So just to wrap up the whole thing, I think we can say that cultivating an inner attitude is already taking social responsibility. And then from there, if you know how to sing, you can create a choir or join one. And even if you don't sing too well, if you know how to teach, you teach. If you know how to write, you write. If you know how to translate, you translate. And if you know how to smile, you smile. And you can even smile and sing.
Und man kann sogar lächelnd singen.